Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia. Welcome back to another faction preview video for the Fates Divided DLC, and today we're taking a look at Liu Biao's faction in the 200 start. Now there is this line that says there are no missions or objectives concerning Liu Biao at this start date. I don't know if this is implemented as an error or is this actually a warning that Liu Biao just doesn't have any feature missions in this start date. That's for us to find out once we start playing him. Now, ideally, the 200 start is probably not the best representation of Liu Biao if you want to experience his faction mechanic of governance. Not because he starts out too weak in this start, but simply because he starts out a bit too strong in this start, in my opinion. I don't think his starting situation should be normal. It should probably be easy. This is probably one of the more beginner-friendly factions for the 200 start. We'll explain why. Now, for those of you who are unaware, Liu Biao started out in the game when the game was first launched without technically a faction unique mechanic, and later on he got the governance mechanic. It's a very well made rework for him, very similar to Sima Liang's mechanic from the 8 Princes, a very good adaptation of that, and we have featured a Liu Biao campaign on the channel, and I think it's very well designed in that it forces you to make trade-off in the early game. It's a very hard climb, but eventually it does snowball very strong in the late game, and it makes you focus on diplomacy and the vassal system, which works quite well with his initial design of having 2 vassals in the 190 start date. Now you can see that Liu Biao is playable on every single chapter pack date, well, not counting 8 Princes just simply because the time gap is way too far, but this might be the last time we will see him. He might be gone depending on what time exactly the next chapter pack becomes. He will pass away around 207, 208, so it depends on which date they pick there. We might not see him anymore, but assuming he will be featured in the next one, mainly because I think that makes for better storytelling, but maybe we'll get the aftermath, so I'm not sure. I'm not going to make any predictions about that now. Let's just focus on the faction at hand. So Liu Biao has the same exact unique features as before. You have the governance system, which limits how many counties you can own at one time. It's a domain system. You must gain points to maximize your domain size, and you use your lodging building, which is a unique inn building, to do so. It's a very powerful building by itself, and it doesn't have any requirement on your settlement level. So even if you have a level 2, level 3 settlement, you can maximize your lodging building to rank 5 right away, assuming you have the reforms, which is really powerful both from an economic perspective as well as a faction-wide perspective. So it forces you to make these decisions early on with these lodging building, and it limits you to which counties you want to hold and how you want to approach your vassal system, because you can now grant vassals from administrators. Those are all changes that plays very nicely into Liu Biao's faction. You have decent units in the infantry of Jing. Jing obviously represent the province that he was the governor of, the Jin province, and he has the Imperial Defenders, which is an upgraded version of the infantry of Jin. So think of these as improved spear guards and improved heavy spear guards. We are one of the few governor factions still left in the game at 200 start. Ma Teng would be the other one, and Shi Xie. So there's not many of us. I don't think Liu Zhang is a governor faction. I could be wrong. I don't want to switch over because I don't want the visor voiceover to activate. You guys can definitely check out his start. I'm pretty sure he's not governor. They're no longer, categorized by governor status. So I think he's not, because I don't remember seeing the seal symbol on his screen when we did the previews, but you guys can definitely go check. And many of you have asked about these new. Every single one was new, but I opened them before, therefore they're no longer new, and the ones that are still new are ones I haven't checked out the starting date yet. I'm gonna save that for when we take a look for the previews, because some of these factions here just doesn't really have historical significance, so I haven't really checked them out very much. We know they're pretty much stuck with one county, survival mode for the bandits. Now for us, Liu Biao, if we look at the land, this time we actually have majority of the Jin province, the historical Jin province. The Jin province is huge. Technically, in the north, it should go all the way to Nanyang, so these 3 should also be ours, but the game decided to give them to Zhang Xiu, which is okay, because what happened historically with Zhang Xiu is Zhang Xiu's uncle Zhang Ji decided to become a warlord, after Dongzhuo's death, whereas Li Jue and Guo Si became regents. Zhang Jiu kind of went his way towards Shangyong region, and then they ran out of food, so they made an attack of Xiangyang, which is under Liu Bao's control, in order to gain supplies and maybe find a place for themselves. And Zhang Ji actually died in that campaign, and Liu Bao felt bad about Zhang Ji's death because he felt that, you know, the two of them had no grudges, and he knows that they're only here because they're out of food. So he extended an olive branch to Zhang Xiu and asked him, you know, I'm going to give you some land in the northern part of the Jin province. You can guard it for me. I'll give you supplies. I'm sorry your uncle died in this war. And for a period, you know, Zhang Xiu was Liu Bao's quote-unquote vassal, helping him defend the north. You know, Wancheng, the region around Nanyang, was where he was stationed, and that's why Cao Cao fought Zhang Xiu there. But now, during this start, that war is over. You know, you have the death of Dian Wei, you have the death of Cao Ang, that already happened. And Zhang Xiu decided that at this point, it's better that he surrenders to Cao Cao under the vice of Jia Xu. So you can technically think that Zhang Xiu flipped, but there's no, you know, war effect here. And the reason is, technically, you're still a loyal servant to the emperor, and Cao Cao is the prime minister. Zhang Xiu deciding to work with the prime minister, that's not a rebellion. So you're not going to react to that because you are technically working for the emperor. You're a governor. So that's probably what we need to think about in terms of how this transpired. Maybe the game give Zhang Xiu too much land, because I believe he also owns Xiangyang itself, when in fact they wasn't able to siege down Xiangyang, and Xiangyang has always been the capital for Liu Biao. I think this time they put him in Nan, which is an important city, but I think Liu Biao ruled from Xiangyang historically, so maybe one too many counties given over to Zhang Xiu. We do have the same noteworthy characters. We'll talk about how we got them here, and everything else is still the same for us. We have some very nice boost to tributary income, which is why we need vassals, and character salaries built in our kit, so that allows us to have a bit more generals. Now the key thing here is if you don't play on timeless mode, you're going to lose these bonuses quite soon because Liu Biao is quite old. So you're either going to have to find some good heirs to take over, since your sons are not exactly the best fit for the job, they're generic, or you know, your faction might decline quite a bit when Liu Biao dies because these bonuses are going away with him. This is from his background of being the gentleman of the Han. So with that said, let's pop into game and take a look at all the land we own and some of our early game situations, because we are at war with quite a few factions. So let's check things out.
天下局势虽已大乱，主公仍秉仁义之道，不轻动兵戈，亦不是争权夺土之举。然天下灾祸，苦民深矣。曹操和袁绍正争霸北方，主公若出手干预，定可使局势陡然生变。但您至今仍未有动作，而未来尚不可知。 主公之宗亲刘玄德，此时亦身陷苦战，唯愿其能安度此难关。孙氏兄弟只欲为父报仇，而其仇敌正是主公麾下臣属。此二人欲北上犯我边境，此事万不可等闲视之。主上 乃品德高尚之人，素行公义。若遇兴兵，亦务必只行必要之攻伐，以求保全先祖基业。
Alrighty, so the flyby really introduced our relationship with pretty much every one of the major factions in the game. Technically, Liu Biao's role during this period is quite significant, and we'll talk about some of the historical commentary about his actions or inactions during this period very, very soon. So first off, we do have our situation. Chaos grows, Liu Biao, the threats abound. Sun Ce and his vassals have raised arms against you. To complicate matters, there are also rebellions to the south. Huangzu is doing what he can to fight them on your behalf. To the north, Cao Cao fights with Yuan Shao, a temporary reprieve, as whoever emerges victorious will surely turn upon you. Likewise, the Nanman are occupied with one another. but nearby 视线 eyes all surrounding lands with greed. You cannot overextend yourself, Liu Biao. Deal with your immediate threats and consolidate, lest you be overwhelmed. So that's a fair assessment. We don't even have, those 3 usual little lines telling us what we should focus on, but that describes our situation quite well. And there's no missions, right? We actually don't have missions, so they wasn't lying. There are just no missions for Liu Biao in this time start. I guess you can make your own missions. But we can probably introduce our position. We have the typical holdings in Jinzhou. Like I said, we're missing Xiangyang, which is probably maybe too much land for, Zhang Xiu. Should probably be given back to us. And we have Nan as our capital in Jiangling. We hold Changsha to the south. Jiangxia is being defended by Huangzu. This is all historically correct. And we extend down to Changsha, Linling. And we have a new flag down south. So instead of Cangwu, the characters here are Shan Yue. So Shan Yue is a term that many people get really confused about. For those of you who are familiar with the spring-autumn period and the warring state, you might remember the state or the kingdom of Yue, which would be in this region right underneath Wu. That is a different term. Yue and Shan Yue use the same character, as Yue is the same character, but Shan Yue here refers to people who have stopped paying taxes, has run off to the mountains to start their little bandit kingdom. That was what Shan Yue really stood for. They had really no relations to the Yue people from the spring-autumn period. They're not a different subculture. The terminology comes because Shan means mountain. There were Yue people in the mountains, especially in this region, and some of those Shan Yue tribes, including Yan Baihu's forces, the bandit forces, is really a mix of some local Yue people who never pay taxes in the first place, and you have the Han population who are joining them to become what Chinese will call like 草寇, or basically, local bandits. And there were a ton of bandits in the Jin province. Changsha was very well known at this time for being filled with bandits. It was very hard to govern here, and the more southern part you get, the harder it was. So it was not a very cultivated area. And Liu Biao, when he took over as the governor of this province, he had a hard time taking control of it because he had external and internal threats. So the previous governor, or the prefect, Wang Rui, was killed by Sun Jian, and the government sent Liu Biao in to replace him as the new governor. By the time, Yuan Shu and Sun Jian were thinking about taking over the Jin province themselves. So Yuan Shu wanted to block, Liu Biao from entering into the Jin province, namely Xiangyang. And at the time, if you remember the 190 map or even the 194 map, at least in between, Yuan Shu had this area in Nanyang, right outside the capital, because he escaped from the capital. And also Sun Jian helped him kill the administrator in Nanyang, so he kind of took control of this region. His family is from Runan, so clearly he had heavy influence in this entire region. And Liu Biao had a hard time getting into the Jin province, and the plan that he ended up having is instead of traveling with the, imperial, convoy, he went there himself so that he wouldn't get assassinated or killed along the way. Basically, snuck into the Jin province. And once he got there, he needed the help of some powerful local clans. And 2 clans, actually technically 3 clans, but the main ones in the early stages, 2 clans helped him out. One clan was the Cai clan, who he would end up marrying one of their sisters. It would be, where is Cai Mao? We should have Cai Mao, right? Cai Mao right here. So Cai Mao was probably the head of the Cai clan at this time, leader of the younger generation. His father was probably the leader, but a bit old. I can explain why the Cai clan are strong in a second, but the Cai clan, as you can see here, we start out with quite a few of them. Cai Zhong, Cai He, Cai Xun, Lady Cai as well. Now, some of these characters are fictional. I don't know if they're in the family tree because we are married to Lady Cai. Okay, they're not. And the family tree's messed up, I know. I have let them know already. So this should be our daughter, our son, a son, but not our daughter and grandsons. They should be moved up. And you can tell by the age. She's 16, they're 40 and 36. So there's an issue here that they need to be up here. Now, Lady Cai is obviously the sister of Cai Mao. This is historical. So this is a new wife that Liu Biao took on after entering into the Jin province to give himself a political marriage with one of the stronger clans in the region. And the reason why they are stronger clans is because Cai Mao's father, I believe his name was Cai Feng. I believe his name was Cai Feng, had a sister, so Cai Mao's aunt, who married Zhang Wen. So I don't know if you guys remember Zhang Wen from the 182 start or from any of the lore series. He was the Grand Commandant under Liu Hong, so Liu Xie's father, and he was in charge of the Liang Rebellion that failed. He was the boss of Dong Zhuo, Sun Jian, Huang Fusong. He replaced Huang Fusong out west. He failed, obviously, and eventually came back to the capital. But he was a very strong political force in the capital. He was, known as the Peerless Prestige protege, I believe, in the game. And his, protege is from Cao Teng, the eunuchs. The eunuchs had his backing, so he was very strong at this time. And Cai Mao's family become very powerful because they have that marriage connection. To be honest, the Cai clan really gained all their power through really well-placed marriages, right? His aunt married Zhang Wen, his sister married Liu Biao, his younger sister, another Lady Cai, married Huang Chengyan. And Huang Chengyan is from a powerful clan here as well, from the Huang clan, not related to Huang Zhong, but related to Huang Zu. They're from the same clan. And Huang Chengyan had a daughter named Huang Yueying, who is Zhuge Liang's wife. So as you can see, it's a huge family down here. It's a family business. So the Cai clan is linked to Liu Biao's clan through marriage, is linked to Huang Zu's clan through marriage, is linked to Zhang Wen's clan through marriage, and also technically linked to Zhuge Liang now if you go down one more generation. So they're very well connected. Now, just because they're well connected doesn't mean we should start out with so many of them. Cai Zhong and Cai He are fictional. Cai Mao didn't have them as brothers. The only reason they're here is because Romance of the Three Kingdoms added a lot of story for the Cai clan, because they wanted the post Jin province period, the post Liu Biao period, to be more exciting. Because historically, what happened was Cao Cao came to attack, Liu Biao died of old age, and under the guidance of Cai Mao and where is Kwai Yue? We should have Kwai Yue. Yeah, Kwai Yue. Under the guidance of these two, they surrendered to Cao Cao, and the person that they set up to inherit Liu Biao's estate was his younger son, Liu Chong, instead of his older son, Liu Qi. So, wow, the level difference is startling. He's level 5 and he's level 1. But anyways, the reason why Liu Chong got picked, there was 2 reasons. One, Liu Biao thought he looked like him, and Liu Qi didn't look as good, and Liu Qi was a sickly child. So Liu Biao already liked the kid, to begin with, his younger son. And the second point here is that Lady Cai married her niece to Liu Chong. Once again, the Cai clan at work here with the marriages. So I know it's a close marriage, right, if you think about it, but technically he's not her son, right? He married the dad when he was already born. Look at their age, 42, 36. So they linked up the second generation with marriages too. So obviously the Cai clan favored the younger son because of that as well. So during this whole period before Liu Biao would become old and die, it's a few years away, Liu Qi and Liu Chong already kind of felt that the favoritism is going towards Liu Chong. So at this time, Liu Qi actually went to Zhuge Liang for help, or actually technically Liu Bei for help. Liu Bei was going to join here very soon as he gets defeated out there. We talked about it in his preview. And when Liu Bei came here, a lot of the local clans, flooded to Liu Bei, thinking that, he's going to be a good candidate to take over. Even Liu Biao thought so too. Liu Biao actually tried to pass on the, province to Liu Bei, thinking that he would be a good choice in this time of chaos. But obviously the Cai clan very against that because, they have this son already set up. So Liu Qi felt marginalized, and the plan that Zhuge Liang gave him was that ask for a garrison job to go defend the east, because Huang Zu would die very soon. Huang Zu would die to Sun Quan's attack, and then Jiangling, Jiangxia right here needs to be defended, and Liu Qi goes off to defend it here so that he can stay away from the politics and not get killed after Liu Biao, suddenly dies of old age one day. And that's how Liu Qi got spared. Liu Chong takes over, and the Cai clan becomes a even more dominant power, in the region. And they decided that the best option at that time is to surrender. Now, Romance of Three Kingdoms have us to believe that Cao Cao took the surrender and then murdered Lady Cai and Liu Chong. Right? That's not true. They lived happily ever after. As official, a nobleman, they didn't have any real powers, but they were asked to move away, which is very typical. After you surrender, they wouldn't keep you around. If you look at Ma Teng, asked to move away. If you look at Liu Zhang, after he surrendered to Liu Bei, asked to move away from where he originally had power to make sure that locals don't rally around him one day. So that part is real. He just moved away. He lived out his life just fine, out of the history books. But because that would be a boring story to make Cao Cao a bad guy in Romance of Three Kingdoms, Cao Cao killed them. So Cao Cao killed them in secret and then asked Cai Mao and Zhang Yun, who are both capable generals at this time, to train his navy. And then you had the big story with Zhou Yu using Cao Cao's spy against him to kind of get or trick Cao Cao into killing Zhang Yun and Cai Mao. And then after they died, Cao Cao realized he made a big mistake, and then he asked Cai Zhong and Cai He, Cai Mao's brothers, to take over and train the navy at that point. That part is all nonsense, right? That's all made up in Romance of Three Kingdoms. Cai Mao lived. Cai Mao was the general training the navy. He would live after Chibi. He would be fine. And not written very much about in history book after that point, but he definitely didn't get killed. And there was no inside plot either way. And Romance even had the part where, not only did Cai Zhong and Cai He take over, they were sent over as spies on Zhou Yu's side. And then when Zhou Yu launched the official attack on Chibi, he had Gan Ning kill them to use their blood to sacrifice against the flags to wish them good luck. That's all nonsense. So they don't even exist, but because they are key characters in Romance, they were made in the game, which I can understand. Now, who was actually pretty important in this period for Liu Biao's faction is the Kwai Brothers here, namely Kuai Yue. So Kuai Yue is a very predominant character around this time, and if any strategist from Liu Biao is ever made unique, it should be him. I don't think he should be unobservant, because actually these are all kind of bad. He was probably the most astute character in terms of reading the situation and making the best for himself, and also for whoever he worked for. His advice are always spot on. So we might know him as the guy who gave the plan to lure Sun Jian into a trap and get him killed. That's Romance story. Honestly, that entire campaign, you should really thank Huangzu for doing that. What he did, or how he come of power, is that he's from the local region, but before Liu Biao even got here and everything else, he got a job in the capital. He worked under He Jin. And when he was working under He Jin, he had recommended to He Jin to make the first move against the eunuchs and kill them. But obviously we know the story where He Jin and his sister had debates about it and then ended up not making the move, and it got delayed. And when it got delayed, Kuai Yue realized that, He Jin's in trouble, right? He Jin's going to get killed. So then he asked for a job in the Jin province near his hometown, and he got out of the capital before that mess happened. So he survived. Very smart guy. And then when Liu Biao came to the Jin province in secret, sneaking himself into Xiangyang, he was one of the big clans who were invited to help him, and he came up with a really good plan. So he and his brother, this Kuai Liang is his older brother. The age checks out? Yeah, the age checks out. Good. So Kuai Liang is his older brother, and they offered completely different plans to Liu Biao at the time, because we mentioned overran with bandits internally, and externally there was the issue of Yuan Shu. So first Liu Biao wanted to consolidate his internal power first before resisting, Yuan Shu's faction. And he asked them, how do we take care of all these bandit issues? And Kuai Liang is the typical Confucius solution answer, where he says, we cultivate the people, we educate them, we treat them with good policies of taxation, then we don't have bandit issues. definitely, a solid long-term plan. It looks good on paper, but that's really not the best solution if you look at Kong Rong. His younger brother, Kwai Yue, offered a completely different plan. He said, currently we have so many bandits, but they're mainly bandits because they're greedy, right? They're out looking out for wealth. They're trying to prey on the chaos. And if I get a little bit of wealth from you and we use the wealth as bait, we can gather up all these bandit chiefs at a big meeting in Xiangyang, telling them that you are here and that you're paying tribute to them or you're paying your respect to them, host a feast, give them this tribute, and during the feast, we kill all of them. And then the bandit problem will be solved. And Liu Biao liked this plan too, and it was a really good plan. They gathered up, I think there's 2 different records of this with slightly different numbers. One record says 55 bandit chief, one record says 15. It doesn't matter which one's true. Both numbers are impressive. 55 obviously more impressive than 15, but even if you think about it, if they got 15 different, groups of bandit chiefs to gather up, that's still pretty good accomplishment. And they gathered them up in Xiangyang for a big feast and murdered all of them in the feast. And immediately that made, Liu Biao's name very well known in the region. He had a much easier time consolidating power in this region after that point. And, it's thanks to Kwai Yue. And Kwai Yue, during this whole period after that, when Cao Cao was on the rise, Kwai Yue was very pro Cao Cao. So within the Liu Biao camp, Kwai Yue and Cai Mao were pro Cao Cao, and Huang Zu was pro anti Cao Cao, right? He wanted to have Liu Biao stand up to Cao Cao, but Huang Zu at this time was dealing with a lot of pressure from Sun Ce first and then Sun Quan, and eventually would get killed by Sun Quan not long before Chibi. So by the time that Cao Cao was rolling his army down, there was no more anti-Cao Cao voice inside Liu Biao's faction because Huang Zu was already dead. So that's the situation there. Now we also have Li Yan here. So for those of you who know later histories of Shu, Li Yan will become a very key figure in Shu. And I think the reason why he's here under Liu Biao is because Liu Biao owns Ba at this time. Right? Ba Dong is under his control. So technically, it's a little bit too young to link Li Yan's story to anything at this point, but he will later on become a very key figure in the Shu politics as well as the general. Basically, after Liu Bei was defeated in the Battle of Yiling, where he tried to avenge Guan Yu by Wu, Li Yan was left as the East Guard, who defended Baidicheng from any potential farther attacks by Sun Quan. So he had a very key role, and Zhuge Liang trusted him quite a bit. So later on, he will be quite important. I wouldn't be surprised if we get those later chapter pack. If that happens, he probably deserves a unique portrait as well, and definitely at least a unique background. Right now, he's just generic, completely generic. But you can see the age, right? If he's 20 in 200, he's 10 years old in 190. That's why we haven't heard about him or haven't seen him yet, but he will become prominent later down the line. Jin Xuan, we see him in the 182 start. I think he has control of Changsha, so his role mainly would be a romance role, where Liu Bei had to conquer the 4 southern commanderies after the Battle of Chibi, and he was one of the administrators there. And that story is kind of fictionalized. Now, I think Jin Xue did exist and was one of the administrators, so I'm not saying he's fictional. He's not the case of like saying Cai He and Cai Zhong just doesn't exist in history at all, but he would be different. Back to Kwai Yue, right? His story is not even over, so if you think the story so far has been good. So after they surrendered to Cao Cao, Kwai Yue was very valued by Cao Cao. So Cao Cao recognized that, Kwai Yue is full of good ideas. But unfortunately, Kwai Yue wouldn't live for too long after that point. He would die in 214-ish, so 58, not technically young, but Cao Cao was very happy to get him. And after the surrender of Jing province, he got immediately promoted as one of the 9 ministers in the court. So remember the court screen, you have the 3 grand excellencies, and then there will be 9 ministers. He immediately got one of the 9 minister spots after the surrender. So that's how much Cao Cao valued his talent. Definitely deserving. Now, as for his older brother, aside from the difference in plans that they offered in the early stages of Liu Biao, he kind of disappeared from the history book. And from what historical records we have of the rewards that went to the Jin province officers after the surrender, his name wasn't included. So most likely what happened is that he died. right? I don't think he would just be forgotten, right? Usually in Confucian society, if the younger brother, got a position, the older brother definitely got something. And we know that he was in politics, so it wasn't like he was a civilian. So the only explanation is that he probably died of old age or died of some sickness, just natural death, not in war or anything. So that by the time that Kwai would surrender and get his, promotion, his brother was just not mentioned at all. But that would be around 207, 208. So him being alive now wouldn't be ahistorical. It's just that he's lesser known than his younger brother. And that pretty much covers everyone that's important here. And we can talk about the start. Now, Gan is with us. I think he's with us in 194 as well, because he was part of a coup that happened when Liu Yan died. So when Liu Yan died, it's not like Liu Biao never thought about expansion. He thought about taking over the Yi province because, they're neighbors. But there was a coup inside the Yi province when Liu Zhang was trying to take over. It didn't go well, and some of the officers that headed the coup escaped and joined Liu Biao at the time, and Gan Ning was one of those officers. So that's why Gan Ning is here. I think he was already here in 194, but I haven't played that start with Liu Biao. And speaking of starting out with Liu Biao, the mechanic that we talked about with governance, where the amount of governance you have limits your domain extent, which is how many counties you hold. It's a very fun mechanic. It starts out very slow. So 2, 4, 8. We start out at 18 already. We're already in great, which is, why I think it's a little bit too easy, because you don't suffer from the penalties of the early stages where you lose income from tributaries, where you lose replenishment, where you lose satisfaction. We're already at the stage where you're enjoying, 15 points of satisfaction faction-wide, 15% extra income from your tributaries, and 3% replenishment, and it's only going to go up. This is one of those resources that you build and never spend, therefore you're just going to snowball into the late game. So you're at a great position at the start. 18 limit is probably more than what you have. I can double check. We currently have 16, right? So we have freedom to expand, at least 2 more counties. And we do have enemies, right? We talked about the Shanyue people down south in Cangwu. This is probably historical as well. They have Zhang Mi leading this faction. I don't know who Zhang Mi is. Technically, Cangwu should belong to... Oh, now I forget his name. It's mentioned a couple times when Zhuge Liang was debating where Liu Bei would go when Liu Bei was deciding to ally with Sun Quan or not. Like, Zhuge Liang used it as an excuse when debating the Wu scholars about the alliance that, Liu Bei could just go to his friend in Cangwu. So there was an administrator here, but there was also a lot of bandits here, and also Liu Biao tried to set up his own administrator here as well. So there was a hotly contested, commandery here. So having some bandits here as enemies makes perfect sense. Shi Huan is a administrator not related to Shi Wu or Shi Xie. This is Shi, a different tone. So different person, not a family member of the you can see it right here. That's Shi, and that's Shi, 2 different characters. Just spelled the same way in Pinyin. And that's the southern front for us, just some bandits to fight. Eventually we'll make contact with both the Nanman factions as well as the Shi clan's, brothers and Shi Xie himself. There might be some trouble there, but I don't think it's going to be too difficult to deal with. The Nanman factions might be more difficult to deal with to the west, even though we border Liu Zhang's faction. I think the point of contact is just really small, right? We technically have just this that's kind of exposed, and I think the easiest thing you can do is enter the war on Liu Zhang's side early on to help them fight Zhang Lu, and have Gan Ning go steal the weapon craftsman for you, which is undefended. Like, Zhang Lu's forces can't get there. It's on the other side of the mountain for him, so he either has to go through Liu Zhang's forces to do so, or come down from over here to fight you from Shangyong, and you have a very easy path to steal the weapon craftsman early on. And then to the north, Yellow Turban and you are actually at peace, and you're not even at war with Zhang Xiu or involved in the Cao Cao and Yuan Shao's conflict. And that probably brings us to another historical point, but we do have enemies over here, right? We are going to be at war with Sun Ce's faction, so all this is technically red, and Sun Ce's vassal, Li Shu and Wu Jin would also be people who could turn on us at any moment. I don't know if they're already at the war. Okay, so he's already in the war, therefore I think he's probably in the war as well. Enemy's vassal. So I think you have your hands full. mainly to the east. It's Huangzu's job, but vassal defense is just not as good as your defense. You like vassals, so maybe trying to vassalize Huaxin would be a good idea since he doesn't own much. He might have one piece of Poyang, but he doesn't have the other three. So even if you want to add those to your kingdom, you don't have to worry about sharing it. You can always trade him something else to get it from him. Like just capture that, trade it with him, flip it, and keep the 4 pieces of Poyang. And you do have strong generals to help you. You have 3 armies at the beginning, yourself with your older son who doesn't like you, not surprised. And then you have Huangzhong back here by himself. You have Gan Ning here by himself. Kind of lonely, but I think they can be buffed up pretty quickly. You have a lot of generals. Maybe consider getting rid of some of them. Maybe I suggest start with the fictional ones that don't even have good traits to begin with. That's a good choice. Like weak, lumbering, coordinated. We can go without him. So that's kind of the starting situation. The one last thing we have to talk about, this is very extra, just the hypothetical history point. Many people blame Liu Biao for his inactivities during the Battle of Guandu, where he had the opportunity to, say, attack Cao Cao. So I think that's A, a lot of hindsight, and B, has no advantages for Liu Biao. So let's think about what Liu Biao is dealing with during this time. Sun Ce just fought a battle where he completely crushed Huangzu, stole off a huge amount of population around Lujiang area, took a lot of your ships, and is setting up for another attack because he wants revenge for his father's death. And even after Sun Ce's death, Sun Quan's first military actions were in this region, fighting off Li Shu, and then later on attacking and killing Huangzu. So it's not like your armies had nothing to do during this time, and you didn't have a good relationship with Liu Zhang either after you had the failed coup attempt. And then to the south, you have bandits literally all over this place, so that's a lot of things for you to handle. And the other point is, why should we help Yuan Shao to fight Cao Cao? Cao Cao had the emperor, right? We are related to the emperor. Why would we take action against the emperor? And 2, what's the advantage of helping Yuan Shao defeat Cao Cao? Like, that's totally hindsight. No one knew that Yuan Shao would lose in the Battle of Guandu. If anything, it looked like Yuan Shao should have won, and Cao Cao should have lost. So if you went in and made that situation even more lopsided, and helped Yuan Shao wipe out Cao Cao completely, can you face off against Yuan Shao at that point? Like, Yuan Shao is already the scarier looking one with 4 provinces in the north, right? From Bin province to the You province to the Qing province to the Ji province. He owns like literally all of this. And he's a warlord who doesn't have the emperor, who's advancing on the capital with the emperor. So who looks like the traitor here, right? Do you trust that Yuan Shao is going there to free the emperor, your kin, and to prop up your, I guess, distant nephew, like multiple cousins removed? Because Liu Biao's, claim to the throne is very, very distant. He has to go back to a Western Han Dynasty, emperor as well. So probably a 300-year gap between when his line crashed into the emperor's line. So it's not like he's a close kin, but regardless, you're not going to believe that Yuan Shao is going to come over here, rescue the emperor with good intent. And let's say if you have good intent and you go there when they're fighting and free up the emperor, then what? Yuan Shao wins and fights you? Like, do you have a chance to do that? To stand against Yuan Shao at that point if Cao Cao lose? Or is it better off for you to watch Cao Cao and Yuan Shao kill each other, and hopefully both of them get weak enough so the emperor has a chance? It's just no one can predict Yuan Shao losing. So I don't think you can blame Liu Biao. He was pretty busy with stuff on his side, and there's really no benefit for him to attack Cao Cao at this point. It's not like he's a young, spring chicken at this point. He's, let's see, how old is he at this point? 58, right? You're asking a lot for an old man. It's not like Sun Ce, who's ambitious, young, eager, probably believe he can handle Yuan Shao after beating Cao Cao to launch such an attack. It's a different situation altogether. And if you fail, right, if Cao Cao beats both Yuan Shao and you, what would you become? You'd be casted as that family member who, drew blade against the emperor, and you'd be a traitor in history. That's not a fate that you can risk at this age. So I feel like Liu Biao didn't do anything wrong being passive at this point. It's more like the setup he had for his sons kind of backfire when the surrender happened. So that's pretty much it for Liu Biao's faction. Just want to throw that point out there, and hopefully you guys enjoy this, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!